How are you? How are you? Everybody still awake? Yes? Okay, good, because I'm not sure that I'm still awake. So let's get into our program for tonight. So I would like to introduce one of oSTEM's very own. So our EFRAM is a Lieutenant Colonel. Brian Fram is an active duty astronautical engineer in the U.S. Air Force. B currently serves as a squadron commander overseeing R&D in offensive cyberspace and counter-drone operations. B has served in a wide variety of Air Force positions, including an oversight role for all security cooperation with Iraq, as an Air Force strategic planner, multiple tours as a program manager for satellite and technology programs, and has deployed to Qatar and Iraq as part of Operation Iraqi Freedom. Lieutenant Colonel Fram also serves as a legislative fellow at the U.S. Capitol on the staff of Congresswoman Madeline Bordallo. B publicly came out as transgender on the day of the military ban was dropped in 2016, and since then has received the extremely warm support of friends, family, and colleagues. Lieutenant Colonel Fram is a board member of SPARTA, an organization that advocates and educates about transgender military service and is dedicated to the support and professional development of over 800 transgender service members. He has provided a number of educational briefings on transgender and diversity issues to military and civilian audiences, including several briefings to members of Congress. B also serves on the oSTEM Leadership and Development Team and is currently editing a book that will be published later this year on transgender military service. B has been married for 14 years to wife Peg, and they have 2 young children. So with that, I would like to warmly welcome Lieutenant Colonel Fram to the stage.
Well, thank you. I hope you've all had a fantastic weekend so far. We still have a little bit of programming for you, but it's been wonderful to be here and to see the experiences that you've had. But tonight, I want to talk to you a little bit about kind of an intersection of STEM, advocacy, and leadership. I'm going to focus a lot on the advocacy piece, and I'm going to try and tie them all together throughout it, because they really have a deep connection in many ways. But on the leadership topic, just to start out with, we've talked a lot about some of the qualities that leaders have, and one of them that we've mentioned is that leaders take risks. And in speaking to you tonight, I think I'm taking 2 big risks. The first is that I'm doing this in heels, and I'm gonna walk around. The second is I just had Mexican. So we'll see where this goes. I think it's a risk I can handle, but hopefully this doesn't end in disaster. So, in this regard, in terms of LGBTQ advocacy, I'm a bit of an accidental advocate, or maybe more accurately, an unintentional advocate. Because when I grew up, I never, ever would have imagined being in some of the roles that I've been in. If I was doing any advocacy work, what I thought it would be at that time was because I was an astronaut, and I was telling all the little kids about all the fabulous wonders of space. I would still love to do that, although I was medically disqualified when I applied. But someday I'll make it into space and share that. I hope all of you get the chance to. But life took a lot of funny turns. And Jonathan told you about quite a few of them, and I'll touch on some of those as we go through this. But why is advocacy important, basically to everyone? I'll relate that early in my career as a program manager, I had 2 things that I considered my job to be. 1, convince everyone that I knew what I was talking about. That was pretty hard, because they're like, who are you? But you can do that. You can tell them, a little skill, a little knowledge, a little chicanery. You can convince people that you know what you're talking about. But the more important thing I had to do was convince people to care. To tell them why what I was working on or what my team was working on was important. why should they fund it? Why should they care about what we were trying to do? Why was it important to national security? And that's kind of the way advocacy works. And it'll work that way for a lot of you, that as a junior member of the STEM career field, you need to convince people why your work is important, why you should be hired by someone, all sorts of reasons why you need to convince people what you're doing is important and you should be able to continue to doing it, and that you'll add value by being allowed to do it. So convincing someone to care is incredibly challenging. Now, as you get more senior, for example, for me, when I was promoted to Lieutenant Colonel and I left the Pentagon, I showed up in the middle of nowhere at the Air Force Research Lab, I all of a sudden was a senior officer, and people just assumed I knew what I was talking about, even when I didn't. But I still have to convince them to care. And that's important, even all the way through your career. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius wrote that the measure of a man is the worth of the things he cares about. And if you don't think that relates to advocacy too, you're missing something. This has been around forever. So I'm going to talk about 4 levels of advocacy. What I say is doing advocacy at all volumes. And they're all related. They can't really be separated. So as I talk about them, think about how they connect and how you can use multiple levels at the same time. So the first level of advocacy is what I refer to as the silent advocacy, or really the power of visibility. And all of you have the potential for this power every day in what you do just by being yourselves. Now, this is often the most powerful form of visibility, particularly on a personal level. When you get to make that one-on-one connection with somebody and they can respect you as a human, that's just about everything. That is how you change hearts and minds on an individual level. And for people that are different, that's a big challenge. Because like leaders that we talk about, people that are different live in a fishbowl. Everyone is watching you. Whether you know it or not, people watch what you do, they listen to what you say, and they consider your every move. Because in many cases, you might hear, you know what? You're the first trans person I've ever met. You're the first gay person I've ever met. I'm guessing that's probably happened to a lot of you in some circumstances. And when you're the first, you set the standard in many cases. Yeah, we have cultural background that kind of influences people's behavior, but when you experience something firsthand, you make a huge impression. And your success and your failures are amplified because you might be creating a stereotype. And for that one person, if you're all they know, they're going to take the reflection of you and apply it to the next person they meet. And every person after that, because first impressions are incredibly powerful. So just remember that as you're living your life, people are watching. And for good or for ill, you have a lot of power. A lot of power. I'll give one example from my personal story. It was a little while after I had come out. I had switched jobs, working in the Pentagon. And about 8 months into that job, my colonel, who was my boss at the time, was retiring. And before he left, he called me into his office. And he said, you know what? You broke my stereotype. Just by coming to work every day, showing up, and being good at your job, you absolutely changed my impression of what a trans person was. Thank you for doing that. And that was just by doing nothing out of the ordinary except my job. That's the power you have every day in doing what you do. So silent advocacy, power of visibility, probably the most powerful, changing individual hearts and minds. Second level of advocacy I want to talk about is the power of the pen. You can do a lot by writing and by communicating. When I was working in Congress and bills would come up for a vote, the congresswoman would often walk back to the staff office and she'd ask around and she would say, "Has anyone written us on this topic?" One phone call or one letter could change the way she was going to vote, because that said that one of her constituents cared enough to write her a letter and make their views known. And I saw it happen several times where as few as one person changed the outcome of how she was going to vote. You have that power with your elected representatives and people that you know. Excuse me. So, and making use of that power, whether it's with your elected representatives to do things on your behalf or change that view, is something you always have access to in this day and age. Social media is a huge amplifier for all of you in whatever you want to say. There are opportunities out there. You even go old-fashioned, you can write letters to the editor. Write an opinion piece. You can change hearts and minds easily with the power of a pen. So use it if you get the chance and you have something that you feel is important. And it's not just at the national level. In preparing for giving this talk, I called my friend who is a city parks commissioner in Minneapolis. And I said, what is it that someone can write to you or say to you that really influences your thoughts and how you might see a problem? And he said, that's easy. It's stories from people directly affected by a policy that are heartfelt and sincere that will inform me in how I make policy. You all have that opportunity at any level to let someone know how you care about something. So use that power of the pen. And going back to social media, people really do listen to you. We all hear about things that go viral and make a big impact. But I want to go back to my coming out. So that day, 2016, the Secretary of Defense is speaking, and I'm sitting at my desk in the Pentagon. I knew it was coming. I knew the ban on trans service was going to end. So I had something prepared. I had a Facebook post ready to go, and I had an email to many friends and colleagues and the people that were sitting all around me working there that day. Secretary finished, and I hesitated. Do I send this? Do I hit post? Finally got the courage to do it, and I ran off to the gym. And I went to the elliptical machine. I probably burned the motor out with all my nervous energy. I went faster than I ever had in my life, wondering, what is the reaction going to be when I get back to my desk? So before I tell you about that reaction, I'm going to share a little bit of what I wrote and shared with people. I said, I want to share something with all of you. I'm transgender. I've known I was trans since an early age, though I struggled to find the courage to admit what it meant to me and how I could and would express myself. I know that I'm happiest and most fulfilled as a human when I get to express all aspects of who I am. I no longer have any reason to hide who that is. Being Brian has never felt wrong to me, and Brian won't go away. It's just not all of who I am. So why bring this into the open now, or ever? With all the recent news regarding bathroom bills, the shooting at Pulse in Orlando, and today's just announced removal of the ban on being trans in the military, there's really no better time. As SecDef just said, our military and our nation will be stronger with this change. I've done several outreach events and some advocacy work with Sparta, a group of active duty transgender service members for the past 2 years, but I can have a lot more impact if my story is public. I want to be in a position to help others, and visibility is ridiculously important. If my story can sway a few people from neutral to supportive on transgender rights, or educate some folks who never had a reason to be involved or informed, I'd consider coming out to be a great success. Peg and I want to raise the kids to be open, honest, and tolerant. They've known about me for a while, as we felt it best not to lie or hide things from them that they would learn about eventually. We want to avoid any perceived hypocrisy between how we ask them to behave and how we behave. There will be no longer a need for worrying about who might know, or what can be said, or what the kids say. None of this has been easy on Peg, and it probably never will be. Dealing with me being trans has probably been even more of a challenge for her than it has for me, even though she's known since shortly after we started dating. She's been beyond amazing, even though it's been a roller coaster ride, and there have been some very difficult times. But day to day, this doesn't really change much in how I live my life. However, it frees us to be more open and effective champions of issues that affect us and our many friends. Being an advocate within the community only goes so far. Perhaps I'm the first transgender person you know. If so, great. Either way, I'm more than happy to answer any questions about my situation, the advocacy I've done, or anything else you care to ask. Thank you for your friendship over the years. I'm truly lucky to have all of you. We're friends here for a reason, and I sincerely hope that reason hasn't changed because I enjoy having all of you in my life. I look forward to continuing to share that joy with all of you. Above all, I remain a happy and committed spouse, father, child, sibling, and airman. I'm proud of all those roles. It just happened to be a bit more. So that went out to everyone. And as I said, I wondered, what is the reaction going to be? Because I really had no idea. I got back to my desk, and I sat down, and the people in my office, one by one, walked over to me, shook my hand, and said, "It's an honor to serve with you." Talk about being floored. Because they had it completely backwards. It was my honor to serve with such amazing people that would be willing to make that move right away to say, wow, it's an honor. And for my friends and my family, nothing but love. It was incredible. It wasn't all roses. I could say my wife actually bared the brunt of it and lost friends and family over it. So it's not ideal, but as I said, it freed us to do so much more, to be effective advocates, and to make people care. Because it matters when you know someone. All right. Third power. Power of the voice. You all possess this one as well. This is your opportunity to speak up when random situations of chance arrive. Just the water cooler conversations you might have. When someone says something homophobic or transphobic, or just in general nasty, it's tough. But you have the chance to speak up and educate and advocate and make change when you do that. Your voice can make a difference because oftentimes those things are said out of ignorance, not hate. And you can change that by saying, you know what? That affects me. That affects someone I know. It's, once again, not easy to have the courage to do that. And if you're ever worried, scared, don't. Pick your moments. But you have the opportunity and the power within all of you to make change happen, even at the most random moments. I had one of those before I came out. So back up a year before that speech by the Secretary of Defense. It was while I was working on the Hill. And a friend of mine worked in the office of the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee. And news of a possible change in the trans policy had been getting out, and Congress was considering, should we do something to stop this? Should we put legislation in place to prevent open trans service? And so my friend and a couple of other colleagues of mine, all members of the Air Force, were having a conversation, and that topic came up. And some questions were asked, and I was answering, and eventually the conversation kind of dies down. My friend says, "How do you know so much about this issue?" And that was my, oh shit. I've only told one other person before, but let me tell you something about me. And he turned out to be a fabulous audience, because he was truly that blank canvas of, I don't know about that, but let's have a conversation. Please educate me. And you never know when that little thing could change a person or it could change a policy, because nothing came from that legislative session to try and ban trans service. And I don't know, I didn't follow up and say, hey, did you go talk to the chairman and put a word in his ear and say, yeah, maybe not a good idea right now. Maybe you did. You have the ability to make some pretty interesting connections. And we've talked a lot about networking. Your network's going to reach a long way at some point. And the word you put in one person's ear may make it in someone else's that really has the power to do something consequential. Or it might be you that has the power to do something consequential. So use those opportunities when they come up. Another thing to use if you have the opportunity to use your voice is use the media. Oftentimes, we don't expect to get involved in a news story, but sometimes it's important to get yourself involved. And if you have something you really care about, call them. Call your local TV station. Call your local newspaper. Send them an email. Ask them, hey, are you interested in covering this story? I'd love to talk to you about it. And maybe they either interview you or do an investigation, find something out. But that's a great way to amplify the power of your voice and what you care about. So consider reaching out to the media if you have the opportunity and the willingness to do so. All right, last level of advocacy, and the biggest one. It's the power of we. How do we come together to make change? How do we organize to make the really big things happen? So I want you to think about something. For those of you that have been part of oSTEM chapters that have been around for a little while, what if your chapter had never been formed? What if someone had decided, no, I really don't want to do that. I don't want to take it on myself to put this together and put the resources in place to help my fellow students. Someone took a risk to organize and to create change and to help and be an advocate for all of you. And it leads to some pretty amazing things. Also goes back to that connection to leadership. Leaders have a vision. Leaders are willing to get a shared buy-in. They're willing to grab people together and say, let's go this way. Let's make it better for the people that are going to come after us. But it's a form of advocacy too. Because big change really does require big effort. It takes a team. And when you start to put some of these things together, I want to give you one example of we plus visibility. There was a small group in the Lehigh Valley in Pennsylvania. It was a trans support group, and it was kind of put together by word of mouth through some therapists. And the group was dying. It was down to, I think, 6 old, white, relatively wealthy women. And it was falling apart. And one of them had thought, you know what? Maybe we should be a little more visible about who we are and what we're doing and give this an opportunity to grow and to be advocates for the community, not just us, who even though they're trans women, kind of had a lot of things going for them, a lot of privilege in their own right. So they dropped the requirement to get a word of mouth recommendation from a therapist. They created a website. They got information out there in a whole host of outlets. And their dying group exploded. The need in their community was vast. They went from 6 members to, in just over a year, 500 members. They led a lobbying effort at over 12 different local and county organizations to create ordinances for non-discrimination and got conversion therapy banned in several different administrations. They developed trans-inclusive policies at a dozen local schools and universities. Just by a few people saying, you know what? Together, by being visible, we can make change. That's really the power of advocacy. Now, I kind of want to wrap it up by connecting it to leadership. There's so many qualities that are shared by a leader and an advocate, and they all apply to those of you in STEM as well. We mentioned most of them, but it's that willingness to take risks. Whether it's just being visible, whether it's getting your voice out there in some way, that's a personal risk in a lot of ways. Or leading an organization and deciding to do something that could lead to massive change, but you might fail. Leaders take those risks and they get others to join them. You can do that. You all have the power to take great risks and reap great rewards. Leaders and advocates believe in something that's greater than themselves, because they care about it, and they make others care about it too. And that's what you can do, just by being yourself and putting your voice out there. But to be an effective leader, an effective advocate, you gotta find that connection. You gotta find the way that you make other people care. And I hope we've given you some of the tools here during this seminar and all these sessions that you've had and the leadership modules you took to make that connection and to network and find others that you can make connections through third parties. Find those opportunities. They are out there and they are legion. So I want to wrap it up by going back to that Marcus Aurelius quote. Can you all be worthy of the things you care about? Can you go out there and make change that's going to make the world a better place? You've got a lot of power, and I certainly hope you choose to use it. So thank you, and I am more than happy to take questions.
Anybody have any questions?
Hi, thank you for your speech, and it spoke to me a lot. My question is, what type of leadership do you consider about yourself?
So if there's one thing I as a leader hope to accomplish, it's to create the leaders that are going to follow behind me. And when I get new lieutenants that come into the Air Force, sitting down and we have a discussion about this, my job isn't to make them technical experts. It's not to teach them everything they can possibly know about being in the Air Force, but it's to be a mentor and to try and give them a path and a sense of purpose that makes them someday, 15 years down the road, want to take my place and make it easier for the people that come after them. So I think we talked about this afternoon, that leaders create leaders. And that's the biggest thing I think you can do, is carry on the tradition and make sure there are people following you. Any others?
Talked a lot about the tools that are given to leaders. What do you think your biggest accomplishment as a leader has been?
So that's a tough question, but what I'll say is that I think I'm in the middle of maybe getting to that biggest accomplishment right now. I've taken several risks in my new position. It's my first time as a commander in the military. And there was some money offered to another organization to do a big thing for the Air Force. And they said, we just can't do that right now. We're too busy. And I stood up in the back of the room. I just happened to be in this meeting. I said, you know what? My organization's going to do it. We are going to go out, and it's not what we normally do. I work at a research lab, and this project was actually to get some of the technology that we've developed and put it out into the field and put it at every Air Force installation around the world. That's not our job. That's not our expertise, but it's important. And if we don't do it now, there are people around the world at risk because we're putting out a key defensive technology against an emerging threat. So I said, you know what? We're going to do it. We're going to find people. We're going to find a way to get this going until this other organization is ready to go. And you know what? We might fail. If we do, I might get fired. I might lose the confidence that my boss has in me and said, you know what? You don't need to be in this position anymore. But if we succeed, that's awesome. That's a win for the Air Force, and that's a win for every person out there who might be protected by the system that we're putting out there. So, yeah, it might pay off for me. You might, yeah, great job, glad you did that. But it's not about me. It's about the organization. It's about doing the right thing. Because far too many people are timid, and they're not willing to take that risk. They'll say, I'm going to cover my butt, and I am not going to do something, because that's the easy way. So take risks, go out there, even if there's personal risk involved. And I think that's what makes you a good leader. So hopefully this pays off and becomes the biggest success that I can talk about.
So the university I go to, we have a really big ROTC program. And I know personally a lot of people that are part of the LGBTQ plus community, and they're afraid to come out for various reasons. What would you say to all these people?
So a big argument I make, and right now I'm heavily involved in kind of the pushback against the proposed ban on trans service members. And one of the biggest things we say, both for us, and it's an argument that also applied to LGBT folks during the Don't Ask, Don't Tell era, is by being in the closet, we will never live up to our full performance. Because there's a filter that has to go in your brain in between your thoughts and the words that come out of your mouth. And even if it's, what did you do last night? You have to take that little pause and say, can I tell you? Do I have to make something up? Because if I say the wrong thing and it gets in the wrong ear, I'm going to lose my job or something else. So the biggest thing I can say to someone who's in the closet and might want to come out is that it can be freeing. It frees you to live up to your potential. You can be good at what you do. You can be great at what you do. You're never going to be as good as you can be when you have to have that even microsecond delay between your thoughts and your actions.
Hello. So my best friend who's gay is currently studying abroad in Europe because he's afraid of the current administration. And I've kind of seen this divide among queer people where it's like, do we fight or do we flee? And I'm wondering, when is the time to flee and when is the time to fight?
Good question, tough question. It's an individual decision. I really think it is. However, when you have something worth fighting for, I say fight for it. Because it's about leaving that legacy behind and trying to make the world a better place for those who come after us. And if you get the opportunity to stand up and be counted, please try and do that. Obviously, if your personal safety is at risk, try and do things smartly. But some of us are willing to pay that ultimate price. it's something no one wants to do, particularly in the military. We signed up for that potentiality. None of us want to, but we believe in something that's so important, the ideals in our Constitution, that we believe we can all continue to strive for something more perfect, that we're willing to lay down our lives to get there. And if it's something so important as human dignity, I want to fight for it, and I'm going to continue doing that. So I leave it to anyone to make that decision for yourself, because everyone lives under different circumstances. I'm going to stay here and fight.
So, now that you've been involved with the effort to have this visibility within the government, what do you say to the next generation of people who are going and either going into the military or going into industry who supports the military, or just any person from this room or community that might be going into the government? What do you think they should do to help continue this movement in the government as a whole? It's separate from the rest of the industry and not competing.
So the government offers a lot of opportunities and a lot of possibilities for people. But I'd say go and be who you are. If you want those opportunities, you want to serve, you want to be part of something, go for it. And with the rest of us, prove every day that we belong. That is often the most powerful thing you can do. We talked about just by being visible, showing competency, and going after it and being a superstar. You can do that in government. You can do that in private industry. You can do that wherever you're given the opportunity. So, if it's government service appeals to you, go for it. Nothing is permanent in the world of administrations and policies. Things change. And sometimes change can be most effectively managed internally. By having that voice on the inside, you have access to people that might otherwise never hear from someone like you. They might not listen to a news story or a political rally, but if you work for them, you work in the same organization, you might be able to say, "Hey sir, can I talk to you for a few minutes?" And you can have, once again, make that personal connection. It often takes both, working from the inside and working from the outside. And both can be effective, both are needed.
I was wondering if you'd be willing to give us a little synopsis of your book?
Sure. So one of the key things I want to highlight in this book is an ability to reclaim some of our past, as well as showing off some of today's heroes. And the problem, particularly for trans folks in the military, and almost as much for lesbians, gays, bisexuals in the military, is we don't know who our heroes of the past were because they were invisible. So in the book, we're reaching back to veterans who served basically from the Vietnam era forward and saying, tell your story. What was it like to be trans and to know and to hide it in the 60s or the 70s? We want to talk also a little bit about what some of the organizations like Sparta that I'm a part of, and TAVA, which is the Transgender American Veterans Association, how did they form? How did that idea come about to be leaders in that advocacy arena? And then just to share stories of people who are currently serving so that future people that want to serve can say, look at what they did. Look at what they accomplished as an open trans person in the military. There are some people to look up to because there are so many people doing so many amazing things. And just this coming Tuesday, we have 5 trans service members testifying in front of the House Armed Services Committee. And I've been reviewing and editing their testimony and what they're going to say. Their stories are so powerful. Having just returned from deployment after having transitioned, and to be able to say, there were no issues. people were actually, and one of them was a doctor, and she said people were more open and honest with me about their medical conditions because they could tell I was authentic. I was who I am. And they opened up to me like they never had before I transitioned. And it's just sharing those little tidbits that people can say, wow, that's really cool. And look up to people and say, yeah, I can do that too.
So I was just wondering if you could answer the question of how do we fight back against prejudice when we are trying to convince people of care and the something that we are fighting for?
You guys ask all the tough ones. It's usually those personal connections that can make an impression. If you have a way to connect with that person over something unrelated to the issue you care about or that you're worried about their prejudice over, say you have a hobby that you enjoy together. Sometimes it works to find that connection, talk about that for a little bit, and then circle in to what's important. And if they've already connected with you over something that says, you're a human I could enjoy talking to, you might be able to work in something and say, oh, you know what? There's also this. Do you still hate me? You know, so it's a really tough one, but if you can find an alternate way of making a connection with that person, or get them to reimagine the situation in which, say it was their child that came out, how would they feel? Some people are terrible, are horrible humans, and they'd be like, yeah, I'll kick them out. You know, it's a sin, it's horrible, it's heinous. And we're not going to redeem everybody. But if we can move that 30% that are kind of in the middle or neutral, slightly against us, just a little bit, it makes change happen for all of us that much faster. Because we don't have to get 98% of people to be the greatest allies in the world. But if we get 70%, that's pretty overwhelming. And once again, being visible is so important in that. And I'll relate it to another story. When the president did tweet about saying, nope, trans people can't serve, they're a burden on the military. Around that time, about 50% of Americans believed that trans people should be able to serve. In the month following, because all of our stories all of a sudden got out there because the media cared, all of a sudden, hey, what are you actually doing? We got stories out there, people are on national news all the time. There's a roughly 15 percentage point change in the American people's opinion of whether transgender people should serve. And now, several years later, we've added another 10 percentage point. Over 70% of Americans believe that trans people should serve because we can show day in, day out, we're doing exactly what's being asked of us. And it's the same with any of you being visible. You'll change a few people. Maybe not everybody, but you can get a few.
So it sounds like you've had a pretty positive personal experience coming out. But how do you respond when someone responds negatively to your identity? How do you do it without making I don't want to say like making a scene or responding aggressively?
Sure. So, the first judgment to make is, how much do I care about this person? Do I want or need to educate them or change their mind? Are they just a horrible human that I'm going to walk away from? And it's tough, because sometimes, you internalize that, oh, they hate me, there must be something wrong about me, it's my fault. No, it's not, they're an asshole. You can walk away from them in many situations. But if it's someone you think, hey, this is a relationship that's important to me, once again, I might try and find that other way of connecting with them, whether it's a work relationship or personal relationship. But it can be tough, and once again, you're not going to win over everyone. But the first thing, determine whether it's worth going after or not. All right. Thank you for all the great questions. Definitely be around the rest of the weekend. Please come ask me anything if you want to do it in private. Happy to talk to you. And I think we've got one more icebreaker activity for you tonight. So stick around.